All right, thank you. So I am Steve Surhigh. I am a vice president with Harman's Cloud Solutions team. And basically my job at Harman is I work with a number of the automotive OEMs to help them connect their vehicle to the cloud. And so what we'll talk about today is what we're doing in that space to help connect vehicles into the broader IoT ecosystem. So just by way of background, let me introduce Harman. For those not familiar with Harman, you may be familiar with some of our brand names, including JBL, Harman Kardon, AKG. We provide a variety of different audio products. And I should mention that everybody make sure you get a raffle ticket. We will be raffling off a number of these things over at the Harman booth immediately after the presentation. So make sure you get a raffle ticket. It should be a little orange ticket. But Harman was recently acquired by Samsung in March of this year. And the rationale behind that was Harman is actually #1 in the automotive space in something referred to as infotainment, which a lot of us look at the center console of our vehicle and we see a navigation system there. That navigation system is actually the brain of the vehicle that we hear about autonomous driving. That's where a lot of the processing is being done to drive a lot of the autonomous aspects of the vehicle. And so Harman is actually the market leader in infotainment and connected vehicle technologies within the automotive space. So it's a tremendous fit with Samsung. And there's a lot that we're doing in the background, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but to connect our solutions with a lot of the Samsung solutions that you see out here today. So in order for us to think about the future, I like going back and looking at the past and thinking about the past. And I'm from Detroit, which is, you would expect the car guy to be from Detroit. But if we look at going all the way back to the 1800s, a lot of historians credit Henry Ford with having a major impact on society in terms of being able to mass produce vehicles and the changes that that had on society. So if we go back into the 1800s and we look at Detroit or any other city, Detroit had about 200,000 residents. It was the 15th largest city in the United States. At the time, New York had about 1.5 million residents. But if you looked around at the city, you saw very much what you see in that photograph. You saw horse-drawn carriages. You saw cobblestone roads. You saw blacksmiths. You saw a lot of stuff that, when we think about it today, it just seems so foreign to us. And if you fast forward a little bit, Henry Ford did his first test drive in the early 1900s. And by 1913, he had actually produced more than 15 million Model Ts. So when you look at the picture that we see in the lower left here, by 1920, that's what the streets of Detroit look like. And you can see there's a lot of cars. And Detroit actually became fairly innovative when it came to the original launch of the automobile because it was one of the first cities to start paving roads. Detroit actually used a machine that was originally designed for marking tennis courts to start setting up crosswalks. And that was in response to the fact that 32 people were killed in car pedestrian accidents. And so Detroit was the second city behind New York to set up a traffic court. So if you look at the automobile and what it did to change society and the things that we know today, if you go outside, you'll see streetlights, you'll see lane markers, you'll see all kinds of things that everybody is familiar with from a driving perspective, but didn't exist back in the 1800s. So fast forward to 2017, and Detroit's urban sprawl is fairly significant, and with the suburbs, now everybody can commute to work. And really, historically, there were kind of 5 key areas where the automobile had an impact on society. Everything from infrastructure, paving roads, creating streetlights, to employment. It created higher paying jobs. It changed, it actually created labor unions for the safety of the workers that were working in the plants. From a lifestyle perspective, with a horse and buggy, you could travel approximately 15 miles. The average commute is 20 miles for anybody in the US today. So you could ride all day in your horse and buggy and you still wouldn't get to your office. So if you look at the advent of the automobile, from a lifestyle perspective, it enabled fast food. It enabled drive-in movie theaters. It enabled families to take family vacations. None of that existed prior to the automobile, but the automobile became the enabler for all these different features. From a housing perspective, the suburbs were created because people could take longer to get into they had more time to drive into their office. And then from a business model perspective, we saw the emergence of gas stations. We saw the emergence of fast food. Fast food wouldn't exist without the automobile. We saw the emergence of convenience stores, motels, ancillary products like car radios. All of these cottage industries were directly the result of mass production of the automobile. So if we look at the main disruptor in the automotive space today, autonomous driving, it's likely to drive very similar differences, not only in the physical aspects of how we live, but from a digital perspective. So all these different technologies out here right now are somewhat held at bay in terms of their ability to connect with vehicles. And all that is going to change. And we'll talk a little bit about how that comes together. But from an autonomous perspective, in the automotive space, there are really 6 different levels of autonomous driving. And right now, if you go out and you drive a Tesla and put it in autonomous mode, you still legally, as the driver, have to be prepared to take the wheel in the event of a mishap. When you get all the way down to level 5, that's no longer a requirement. And so the expectation is, at that point, that we're looking at an environment where the vehicles are traveling around, and technically nobody needs to own a vehicle at that point in time. It's transportation on demand. And so what they're doing is basically serving that vehicle based on what your needs are. So it creates an entirely different ecosystem around the vehicle. And if we look at the timelines in terms of when we might expect to see something like this, so in 2017, California was the first state to legalize autonomous vehicles. And if we fast forward to 2026, Morgan Stanley is saying that they expect 100% of the vehicles sold to be autonomous. And by 2040, various studies are saying that 50 to 75% of the traffic on the roadways will be autonomous. And then Daimler is saying by 2064, on a global basis, they expect nothing but autonomous vehicles to be sold. And then finally, by 2070, Fear and Peers reports that they expect 95% of the vehicles on the road to be autonomous. So from a timeline perspective, obviously, it's a long way to go. But everything is building today to support these longer-term aspirations. And a lot of the automotive OEMs are changing their business models today to support this. We're seeing this as we see them invest in Lyft and Uber and Zipcar and these other various forms of transportation as a service. And if you look at pilot programs around autonomous vehicles, everything that I listed up here is non-automotive OEM. So this is impacting other businesses that want to be able to leverage autonomous vehicle technology as part of their business model. And again, this is car sharing, ride sharing. This is your delivery companies. This is companies that have an interest in integrating an autonomous vehicle into their business workflow. And so all of this is really driving a need and driving the business model of the OEMs to look at more and more connectivity with the vehicles and connecting that vehicle to the outside world. Now, if we look at autonomous vehicles in and of themselves, there's really kind of 2 core components of connectivity. One is to support the vehicle operations in and of itself. So if you look at the way we look at navigation today, you can get traffic showing up and you can get some other fuel prices and some other things that appear in your vehicle. But with autonomous driving, in essence, all of the mapping that's already been done has to be redone. And they're doing 3-dimensional high-definition maps, much higher resolution maps that are basically showing the exact boundaries of the roadways, the shoulders, all the way to the trees, the bridge overpasses, everything that you're encountering as you go down the road. All of that, while it's great that we get it mapped out, needs to be done on a more real-time basis. So the need for connectivity to be able to drive that type of data into the vehicle, and even though I showed 2070 up on that prior slide, the reality is a lot of this is taking shape today. Harman's working with one of the European OEMs where we're actually using cameras on the vehicle to read what's in the roadway. We can read street signs, speed limits, We can read construction zone, obstacles in the road, and very much like Waze, we're taking that data, bringing it into the vehicle, triaging it in the vehicle, sending it to the cloud, and then collaborating it with other vehicles in the vicinity. And what that allows us to do, if you think about in Europe, where if you've driven the Autobahn or any of the other things, you'll notice that the speed limit changes based on traffic flow, weather patterns, time of day, et cetera. And the reality of the fact is we're now able to take that, ingest that, and disseminate it and broadcast that out. And so that will continue to evolve. So from a vehicle operation perspective, connectivity to the cloud, tremendously important. Second aspect is in-vehicle content. So if we think about the fact that our vehicle will be totally autonomous and we don't have to pay attention to the road, that's going to open up some time for us. And that time can either be productivity time or it can be leisure time. And what we're seeing now in the vehicles is while today vehicles have millions of pixels in the vehicle, it's going to ratchet up to billions of pixels. And so what you're going to see is a much greater opportunity to start streaming video into vehicles and to start streaming other content, multiple streams, into the vehicle in and of itself. Now, most OEMs are setting that up so that they're taking a single processor and they're putting a hypervisor on it where they have the mission critical functions on one side and the entertainment functions on the other. But the reality of the fact is the entire ecosystem is relying heavily on connectivity to the outside world. And it's connectivity not only to the traditional providers of content that's gone in the vehicle, but it's also connectivity to all these services that we're seeing around us today. So if we look at and think about that connectivity and what does that mean along those same 5 things that we looked at with the original kind of launch of the automobile, in essence, from an infrastructure space, we're looking at a substantially greater need for processing power and bandwidth. It's expected that a fully autonomous vehicle will generate 1 terabyte of data a day, each individual vehicle. So when you start to look at that just for the vehicle operations alone, and then you start adding on streaming of 4K content and multiple people within the vehicle, all of a sudden the bandwidth utilization requirements go up substantially. And then the other aspect is, as we pull that data to the cloud, our ability to maintain, store that data, and then process that data, because we're not just going to pull it up there to create some data lake never to be used, but we're actually going to be applying machine learning algorithms to that data, and we're going to be leveraging that data. So the compute requirements around infrastructure are substantial. And I also listed up here all the physical aspects. I won't go through those, but I believe these slides are going to be made available after the fact. But certainly look through those because some of them are interesting. Because from an infrastructure perspective, it's expected that we aren't going to have as many roads, as many parking structures. There'll be much more green space. So it'll have a substantial impact on how things are coming together. From an employment perspective, I think everybody here at the conference is relatively secure in their job. But if you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there's roughly 5 million people that are in a transportation industry that is roughly going to be, their jobs will be sunset the same way we no longer have the blacksmith profession that we had in the 1800s, but we'll have some of these jobs that are just going to go away. But we'll have the emergence of new jobs, but also increased need in hardware, software, artificial intelligence, data mining. I mentioned the amount of data. I can't emphasize enough the need for data mining, machine learning, and the ability to take that data and reapply it back into the vehicle, either for personalization of the environment for the occupants of the vehicle, or to help the vehicle in terms of its navigation in the route that it's pursuing. The other aspect of what we expect to see increasing dramatically is fleet and logistics managers. So if we have an environment where your car sharing program is in essence a fleet of vehicles, and none of us here in this room own vehicles, at the end of the day, we're going to expect that we're going to be able to go get a vehicle that's going to take us back to either our hotel or our house or wherever we're going for the evening. And the reality of the fact is the development of the routing of those algorithms to even understand that you have an event going on that's going to let out at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, to know that there's going to be a congregation of people who are looking to demand transportation from one centralized area and to be able to queue up those vehicles. So having scientists who are capable of doing that fleet and logistics management is tremendously important. From a lifestyle perspective, certainly if the average commute today is 20 miles and takes roughly 40 minutes, the reality of the fact is everybody's going to get some more free time on their hands. And that can either be applied to productivity endeavors, or it can be applied to something that would be more on the leisure side. But the reality of the fact is it creates an opportunity for the OEMs who are looking to create unique experiences in their vehicles. So the session right before this one was on virtual reality. And the reality of the environment is when they get you in that vehicle, they want to create an experience that's unique in that vehicle. So unlike what you'll see on trains and planes right now, where maybe they'll prop up some generic display that'll have the opportunity for you to stream some movie content or something like that. It's the expectation of being able to leverage the fact that you will be moving in an environment and looking to do things like augmented reality or other virtual reality aspects that are giving you a unique experience in that vehicle. From a housing perspective, this one I actually find interesting from the physical side, because as autonomous vehicles deploy, it's expected that vehicle ownership, private vehicle ownership, is going to dissipate. So the need for garages, the need for driveways, the need for things that we all probably have in our house today is going to dissipate. And it's expected that, that all of that will evolve over time to get to the point where we no longer have garages and driveways. But if we look at the house now, and what a lot of the OEMs are doing today is looking to integrate in with the home automation platforms and looking to, as you're breaking geofences and the vehicle's either entering closer to the home or leaving the home, being able to control different aspects and preset the house or preset different aspects of the environment. But longer term, what the expectation is that whatever your experience is in that vehicle, it becomes transportable into the home. So if you're watching streaming content in the video, you don't have to do anything. You exit the vehicle, enter your house, and that content picks up in the home immediately where it left off in the vehicle. So you're not turning the TV on, trying to get to the same station, trying to do whatever, but it becomes more of a seamless, from a consumer perspective, a much more seamless engagement. And then from a business model perspective, this is again the area where we're seeing it now with what's going on with a lot of the car sharing and ride sharing. And even if you look at some of the automotive OEMs, and I think Ford's a great example of it, Ford's expectation is that in the future, it will derive more revenue from services than it will from selling the vehicle. And the way they're building vehicles now is they're looking to build vehicles where they're opening up aspects of the vehicle to outside development communities. And being able, not just for entertainment for people in the vehicle, but also to allow third-party companies like rental car companies and others to be able to access critical functions of the vehicle, like doing door unlocks, doing remote start, getting advanced diagnostics about the vehicle. A lot of the solutions that exist today leverage something that's referred to as the OBD2 port, which is a little port in the vehicle that you can get limited access to this functionality. But the way the OEMs are looking at it for the future is it's really going to open up deep integration into the vehicle, unlike anything that's available today. The big aspect about business models is monetization. And all of the OEMs are looking to monetize their connected vehicle, starting with, but not entirely, around the data in and of itself. So if we look at the data that comes out of a vehicle, we have routing data about individuals, we have a variety of different pieces of data about how the vehicle is used, including what content's being listened to in the vehicle. And we have, with solutions that exist today, we can tell down to the microsecond when a driver changes a radio station in the vehicle. And while that's very helpful in terms of the OEMs, it gives them a lot of data, it becomes more helpful when you start to look at some of the advertising companies and some of the other media companies that are looking to get that data, where right now, the way that they get that same data is they rely on somebody writing a physical journal, or they attach a little Bluetooth listening device around their neck that passively listens to what they're listening to. And that's how they're collecting that data today. So we can be much more precise, and we can also provide a much greater amount of data from the vehicle to help OEMs monetize. So with all that said, what technologies are relevant to the OEMs as they're going down this progression of reacting to the disruption of autonomous driving? And the reality is, first and foremost, connectivity. So every OEM is currently looking at 5G and beyond in terms of how much bandwidth can we get, how can we effectively utilize that bandwidth, and how can we manage that bandwidth? Because ultimately, whether it's for operation of the vehicle or whether it's for the infotainment components of what's going to be supporting the drivers, they want to be able to consume greater amounts of bandwidth in terms of connecting the vehicle to the cloud. Second aspect is trusted collaboration. When we talk about the data that comes out of the vehicle and need to share that with third parties, one of the issues obviously becomes security. And a lot of OEMs right now are looking at blockchain technology as a means of doing kind of that peer-to-peer validation of and certificate management for the data. Because in essence, and when I say blockchain technology, I'm not talking about blockchain from a ledger management perspective, the way it's being used for Bitcoin, but it's literally the aspect of being able to post data to the cloud with a blockchain certificate that when a third party comes by and picks that data up from the cloud, they know that it's been untampered with. So they know that they can rely on that data. And so very important in terms of being able to develop the trusting aspects of how that collaboration can occur. The third aspect is deep learning and machine learning. And this is really being used for a variety of different aspects within the vehicle. Everything from personalizing the cabin environment to being able to look at routing and other characteristics of how that vehicle fits into a broader ecosystem. And today, when we think of traffic and how traffic gets managed, when you enter a destination in your navigation system, it will pull in real-time traffic, and it will factor that into the route that it chooses for you. And we probably all had it come back up and say, hey, I found a more efficient route. Well, the reality is when you get to autonomous vehicles, the ability to anticipate where vehicles want to be and not just get vehicle one effectively from point A to point B, but every vehicle in the vicinity, trying to manage that entire traffic flow. We see a little bit of that today in terms of there's some smart technology built into the stoplights, where stoplights can alter their timing based on traffic flows and traffic patterns. And there's also some municipalities that alter the speed limit to try to moderate and dampen traffic flows to try to get it so that people are we're able to get more throughput through the street system on an aggregate basis than if you're focused on it from an individual basis. So the next area is contextual virtual assistance. And this is really trying to bring the personal assistants that we have in our homes today, getting those into the vehicle. And obviously these depend on cloud connectivity, and there's a degree of connectivity that's required to support this. But the reality of the fact is the skills that these solutions need to have in vehicle are slightly different from the skills that they need to have outside of the vehicle. There are specific functions that need to be done in the vehicle that we need to train and create skills for Bixby and for Cortana and for Alexa and all these other solutions to make sure that they're able to handle the commands that we're going to give them. And then virtual reality, augmented reality. This gets into, if you look at a lot of the OEMs, if you were to go to CES, you'll see some of their displays for futuristic vehicles where the entire windshield is a head-up display where they're literally augmenting elements onto it. And whether it's navigation-based elements or maybe it's taking Yelp data and showing you as you're passing by buildings, being able to show you the Yelp ratings of the restaurants as you pass by. But being able to do that within the vehicle itself. And then lastly, big data. And I've said a lot about data, and I'm kind of getting rushed along here. But so in a concluding slide, what I just want to share is Harman has a platform called the Ignite platform. And Ignite is designed to help OEMs to connect their vehicle to the cloud and then orchestrate the connections to all the other cloud services that need connectivity to that vehicle. So in essence, from a security perspective, we have a secure pipe where we're going direct from the Ignite cloud into the vehicle, and then we're managing the orchestration and federating security with other clouds. Now, we're in the process of working with the Samsung team to integrate Ignite into the larger Samsung cloud ecosystem, and you can expect to hear more about that in the future, but it's an important part of how Harman comes together with Samsung, and also an important part about how we're bringing the connected car into the IoT ecosystem. So with this, any questions? Yeah, so the question is, are there any standards that are getting developed? So the response is yes. There are a number of industry groups that, again, it's kind of the typical innovation route where there are a number of competing standards that tend to be evolving, which is driving a lot of innovation, but there is no standardized technology right now. And even if you look at things like the platooning technology that's integrated into vehicles today, different OEM manufacturers, their vehicles don't talk to each other yet. They can talk to the same make, but they can't talk across makes.